Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
How's the week been?
Good. It's good to be home. It's a good trip on the weekend. How's your week been?
It's good. Good fun.
Good. Cool. We're finally getting some storms.
Yeah.
Supposed to get major storms last night, and instead we were left with humidity.
Stormed a fair bit here,
Yeah.
and it's about to storm again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Good.
See how it goes.
We need the rain anyway, so nice to have it all freshens up again.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Is there anything specific that you want to go through this week?
No, happy to see what comes up.
See what comes up. What paradoxes have you been through so far? I don't remember for you.
There's like 2 or 3 of them, probably more that we've spoken in. There's paradox of time or non-time, the infiniteness of what time is. There was a couple more. The time is the one that kind of stood out most for me, I suppose. I can't quite remember the other ones.
Choosing.
Sorry?
Choosing.
No, I don't think I've gone through
The ice cream one.
Ice cream. No? Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, we did that. That was only a small one. You did that with Leon.
Yeah, it's
What?
It's like the very first paradox that I normally go through with people.
Yeah. So choose chocolate or vanilla, and why?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Usually ice cream is
Usually what?
sweet. Usually ice cream is.
Love it.
Oh, good times.
All right. We're going to go through like a manifestation process today, I think.
Okay.
Which is a paradox in itself.
Yep.
Yep. Have we done any of the design of things?
Yes. What's the design of the human?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the human design? That's the main one I remember of that.
You look different.
Sorry?
You look different.
I look different. Thank you. Good thing, bad thing? Just different.
You look like you've got less tension in your face.
Cool. I feel less tense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Happy with that. I started, today I started on meditation. It's something I've been wanting to do, meaning to do, and just never did for one reason or another. And just actually having some, like, clearing the clutter and the noise, just through a guided app to at least get me in the right direction while I'm directly in it. And that I'm not accounting that to all of the less of the tension, but it's helped for today, which is good. I believe the whole separation of subcontractor and business is a big weight off my back. Feel much better.
Are you technically off that contract now then?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So she's taken on continuing PT with her clients, and we've agreed that her clients are her clients, and she has all their details. She's all the rent is on her now. All of the client payments are on her now. She's running her own business. I'm still open, and I've made it very clear to her that if she has any questions or any concerns, please shoot me a message. I'm still here for information, but just that business responsibility of taking her on is not mine anymore.
Mm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yep. Much better. Oh.
Good fun. All right. So ultimately we want to understand the design of everything and where that actually sits. So when we think about what we're actually creating in our entire life, we're always creating every single experience that we're going through, which is the consequence. And most people are like, well, how do I create that? It's like cause and effect. Well, that becomes like, how do we create it? Becomes here. If we don't understand the design of something, then we don't really understand it.
Yeah.
So when we think about like creating anything, we can think about it as a manifestation process that we can start to go through. But then we also need to understand the design of every single component of that as well.
Okay.
So it's understanding the design of everything. Anyway.
That as it is
like,
anyway.
Yeah. So.
Because what is everything?
Yeah. All right. Skip ahead here. So ultimately, when we think about creating anything, we're actually going through a specific process to be able to map out the concepts of how we create any thought and how we create anything into our being. If we understand what those are, then we can actually start to consciously create the things that we're wanting rather than just unconsciously creating everything that's just turning up in our life.
Yeah.
So if we're breaking it back down to its most simplest form, then we would just skip those two. So ultimately, there's three components that we look at as we start to break it down more into the design of those different things. Words are an agreement that we create, and communicating things that we're ultimately creating then becomes the foundation, but then it also means that we're taking action behind that.
Mm.
So when we think about that, we're thinking about this becomes the feminine component of it, and this becomes the masculine component of it, and both are essential. If we're looking at creating anything, then we do that through a process of both the masculine and the feminine energy. So if we think about examples of that, the examples of that are like, well, if we're going to create a baby, we'll need the masculine seed and the feminine egg to be able to create anything.
Mm.
You've done the Trinity paradox as well, yeah?
Yeah. See, as you say them, I remember them.
Yeah. So when we think about that one, it's just understanding that there's always three things. So there's never any two things. So in terms of that, it's like masculine, feminine, and Trinity or oneness, or the third component is divine source, whatever it is.
Mm.
So if we understand that, we can begin to create with that. But then we also want to understand, well, what is the design of thoughts? What is the design of words? What is the design of agreements? What is the design of communication? What is the design of action? So it's like 5 paradoxes for 1 paradox.
Clusterfuck.
Yeah. So ultimately, what we want to think about is, well, am I already doing all of these things?
Mm.
It's just that we're not consciously creating with them. We're unconsciously creating our reality by the thoughts that we have, by the words that we're saying, by the agreements that we're keeping or not keeping, by the communication that we're creating, and the actions that we're taking.
Yeah.
So what we want to think about is just understanding every single component of it. Because if I go, right, well, I want to create something in my life, I want to create new clients, I want to create anything, well, what we're actually doing is we're just going through a specific process to be able to do that.
Okay.
Now, the question then is, well, if this then is a process that we create, do we really create every aspect of everything in our life?
I'd say yes.
What about the weather?
Your response to the weather is something that you create, but the actual weather itself, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Why?
Why we don't create the weather?
Mm.
Well, because it's something that happens. Natural phenomenon. Even the weathermen don't get it right occasionally, most days.
Mm.
I suppose you could look at it in terms of environmental climate change and the human population's effect on that. It's one way, but I don't actually know too much on that.
Mm.
So I'm not quite sure.
So what we want to think about is, if I'm creating something and then someone else is creating something that's the same thing, does that create a collective manifestation or a collective thought process of people?
I'd imagine it would.
Mm.
Yeah.
So if we think about all the societal beliefs that we talk about, well, that just creates a certain resonance throughout every single person we come in contact with.
Yeah.
The societal belief is women should be able to do everything without breaking a sweat. They should be a business owner, a mum, a partner, all of these different things, and wear all these different hats and do it without breaking a sweat. So if we think about that, that's just a collective thought process or a collective manifestation of every single person.
Mm.
But then that also creates how the world shows up.
Yeah.
So when we think about that, it's just like, well, there's things that we create, but then there's also things that are created based on everyone else that's around us as well. So do we create the weather?
If we all do a rain dance at the same time, potentially. I don't know about the weather, but I can see where you're going with the whole creating something that's not actually created, but it is.
Mm. So ultimately, all that we're looking at is the mechanism of how we think everything is created, and things that we're in control of and things that we're not in control of.
Okay.
So do we create the weather? Well, it just depends.
Mm.
The point is, we create this entire perspective of the world being something that has zero control, that we have zero choice in, but it just shows up how it shows up, which means that we're at the effect of it rather than being at the source of it.
Yeah.
We're not actually being a creator in our life. We're just being someone who's at the effect or a victim to everything that goes on. We're a victim of the weather. And as you said, we can instantly change our response to that and instantly go, well, it's just showing up in this specific way. And we can also then move to the next level and become a co-creator in something as well. So when we break it down into the individual components, what's the design of like thoughts then?
Design of thoughts. They're internal. They typically are, if you go biological, they're just electrical patterns that go through the brain. Design of thoughts are a response to what's happening around you, within you. whether that be correct, true, accurate, or not. They come from you and the collective.
So what's the design of thoughts, though? That was very much consequences.
Okay. Design of thoughts. I'm not sure.
So what's the design of our phone?
Branding. Design.
That's still a consequence.
Still a consequence?
Yeah. So when we think about our phone, the reason why we bring it back to something physical here like this is because if we think about, well, the consequence is we can use Facebook, we can use text messages, we can call people. The construct is actually the phone. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
What's the design of it? What's the underlying purpose of it? What's the function?
Communication.
Yeah, communication.
Okay.
So when we think about that, because that gives us the infinite possibilities that are within that scope of that design.
Yeah.
So when we think about the design of thoughts, what's the design of thoughts?
Origin of communication.
Origin.
Expression of self.
Expression of self. What else?
Our unconscious coming up. Unconscious mind.
What else?
Internal monologue. Our values and beliefs, or thoughts are based off the values and of your values and beliefs.
So where do a lot of these sit?
Probably in consequence again. Yeah.
Why do we have thoughts? All right, you ready for a bonus paradox?
Sure.
Are you now thinking about thinking?
Oh, brain.
So now you're thinking about thinking. You go about thinking.
Is that the construct of a thought?
No, that's just that's why it's a bonus.
Yeah, bonus paradox. I'm writing that one down.
The point of that though is, well, then we actually start to create separation, or we can create starts to take depths of understanding of what we're actually talking about.
Yeah.
Because if we're just thinking, but the reality is we're really thinking about thinking, so we're already in a paradox. And if we're thinking about thinking that we're thinking about thinking, well, what do we then access?
Space.
What is space?
Ability to create new thoughts.
That's a consequence.
Space, the design of thinking.
Space, the design of thinking. Space is a construct.
It's a construct. Okay.
So that's where that's like
So
the
that's
mechanism.
the actual spot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What's the design of thoughts? Are thoughts real?
Yeah.
Are they?
To the individual.
Imagine a unicorn right now.
Unicorns are amazing.
That's why I use it. Imagine a unicorn right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the unicorn real?
In my thoughts, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we want to look at is, well, are thoughts real? Whether they're real to the individual.
Yeah.
What do thoughts create, though?
Actions.
Not necessarily.
No. Emotions. Thoughts create emotions. Feelings.
Yeah, more in the ballpark of it now.
Thoughts create stories.
Thoughts are stories.
Okay. Emotions, feelings.
So what if it was just the design of thoughts is to create?
Hmm.
To create what, though?
Whatever you want. I can create a unicorn.
Do you create a unicorn, though?
Not in the physical world.
What are you creating, though?
A thought. Projection into my mind's eye. Experience.
So any experience that you have is based on a thought construct that you've actually created. So if you understand the design of thoughts is to create an experience. Now, as just a thought, well, then that's not a physical experience. There's still other processes throughout that. When we think about creating something, we're creating something as a thought construct before anything else. So we're already automatically doing that. We're already doing that with our fears. which is the most common creation that we create. It's a construct of fear. It's a construct of limitation, because when we're in fear, well, then that just creates more of that experience. That is an experience that we create, which is just the experience that we create. The limitation there is that is just an underlying stress mechanism, and it creates a frequency which is a low level frequency for us.
Yeah.
So then we ultimately create a lot of things based on the fears that we have. Fear of loss, fear of gain, fear of anything. That's when we create a lot of our self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
Based on the fear and the manifestation through that fear.
Yeah.
So if we understand the design of thoughts is to create a specific experience, well, if we understand that that becomes the starting point to anything that we're ultimately looking at creating, then we can start to create things as an experience first. Then we can actually create that into a physical experience of that thing. Make sense?
Yeah.
What's the design of words?
To express.
Let's see if I put that up in here to feel fine. Design of a word. Express. You're trying to do it fast, right?
No.
Come on. Express fast.
Oh. Yeah, cool. Gotcha.
It's not funny when I have to explain it. Come on.
I had to explain mine earlier. Come on now. 1 for 1.
What is the design of your word?
To express, to share, communicate. All consequences, though.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the physical, like the speaking, or all of it, as in sticking to your word in terms of integrity?
What's the difference?
Apple. Integrity.
Moving more into the ballpark of it.
No, not sure.
So what encapsulates every single component of your word?
Your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. How do we construct our thoughts though, right? Are our thoughts unexpressed words?
It can be.
Mm.
It can be, definitely.
Mm. So are your words just a conceptualization of your experience? Because if this is a pen, well, and then I'm communicating based on my conceptualization of my experience, of my thought around what that thing is.
Yeah.
So if we're creating, no, it's not what I'm looking for. Yep. The design of thoughts is to create an experience. Design of your word is conceptualization of that experience. Design of meaning, nah, they're different ones. What's the design of agreements?
A joint venture between more than one experience.
I like that. What's the function of agreements then?
To achieve a common goal.
Between who and what?
One or more parties. You can make an agreement with yourself.
Mm. And what does that agreement create?
Expectation. Accountability. Energy, power, flow, forward motion, support.
All consequences. So agreements create trust in ourselves and someone else. It creates the next step, because if there's no belief around it coming to fruition, well, it's not going to come to fruition.
Yeah.
So agreements and commitments create trust. That's the design of it. Well, then it does have the function to be able to continue to the next step of that creation. It's the design of communication.
Deepen trust. Consequence again, though.
Mm-hmm.
To allow openness.
Close.
To facilitate openness. Same thing, different wording, maybe.
What does communication create?
Flow, integrity.
Yep. So we talk about it in integrity, 100%. What does communication create of integrity? What does it create for an out of integrity?
Brings you back into integrity.
Which creates what of it?
Increase.
Completion. It goes down here. Nope. 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 So your design of thoughts is to create experience. Why is that out of order?
Good.
Conceptualization of your experience. The agreement then builds trust in the completion of it coming to fruition. And the communication of it creates completion of it.
Completion of it is what we're looking for. Oh,
yeah,
that's paradox in itself. Completion of it. It's probably staring like right there.
Well, the point is, like, this is completion of it in a feminine energetic component of it. Creating completion in this component of it.
Yeah.
Feminine component of it. So we still need the design of action. The whole point is, if we understand that we're automatically doing this, we're going through this process, we're instantly going, well, the experience that I can create from this is one of stress, and I'm conceptualizing that in my head and creating all of these ways of how that would show up for me. And then, I've shown this has happened so many times before. I'm looking for evidence and looking for trust of that coming to fruition.
Of the stress.
Yeah, of the stress in this instance.
Yeah.
And then I actually create completion of that, and it comes to fruition in my head. It's not actually occurring yet.
Okay.
But if I'm consistently doing that over and over and over again, what becomes my experience?
Yeah. Yeah. Stress.
Yeah. And this is the thing. this sometimes doesn't necessarily happen straight away. It might be that this process is consistently running in the background of something that you want or don't want before you even take any action of it, or before anything shows up based on what you're creating there. So when we understand this process is going on all day, every day, in a moment by moment basis.
Yeah.
And when we can bring consciousness to this process, we can begin to consciously use it to create.
Yeah.
Because we're already creating our experience. It's just that we're not aware of the mechanism of how we're doing that.
Yeah.
So that consciousness of it brings it to fruition. So, what do you take out of that?
Lots. The fact that I've been negatively doing this to myself for a very long time.
Welcome to the human experience.
Yeah. And now that we've gone through that mechanism of it, I can see where it's coming from. Yeah.
Where is it coming from?
Creating the experiences which, why? Coming from previous experiences and layers of stress and feeling that that's going to happen again.
Awesome. So now, when we think about the original design of thoughts that we talk about, which is like memory, comparison, meaning, they're not actually thoughts. Technically, that's what we consider thoughts. They're not actually thoughts though, because they're not created by us, because they're only ever memory, comparison, meaning, or reasoning. When we think about those, they're thoughts based on our ego, based on the low level, based on all of the components at the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Let's bring that down here so I don't have to scroll back. Actually, let's take that one too. What are we talking about? I do not know. Here we go. Yeah, cool. So when we think about thoughts, we break down the mechanism of how we're creating thoughts when we're at a low level, which is only ever memory, recall, comparison, the meaning or reasoning behind it. So we create thoughts through the 3 levels of construct when we're at a lower level.
Yeah.
Which still isn't really creating our thoughts. It's creating our filtering mechanism of our thoughts.
Yeah.
So once we've begun to remove that filtering mechanism, well, then we can actually begin to really create our thoughts.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to create something, but it's consistently going through 3 levels of filtering, well, you don't really get much out of it. Where were we up to? So what's the design of action?
Actually doing it, whatever it is.
Is that the construct or the consequence though?
Could be the construct.
What's the design of it?
Materialization of our thoughts.
The design of action, the materialization of thoughts. I think that would be the consequence still. Anything else?
No, I'm really racking my brain. No.
So when you think about like the materialization, that's like the end consequence.
Yeah.
We go back a bit. I'm gonna have to put this in a table to make it better looking. How we do this. That's not what I wanted. Okay. Let's go back to this. This is the best explanation of it. So we've got materialization as the consequence.
Yeah.
What becomes the design? The action is technically the construct.
Yeah.
Or is it?
The decision.
The decision would be back in the thought process. What creates the cascade of events to knock over that domino? What do you do with your clients in the gym?
I was going to say motivation. I tell them to do something and they do it.
What are they physically doing?
Physically moving.
Moving.
Mm.
That's in the realm of it.
Okay. Right. So moving, actually doing it. Action is preparing by moving.
Close enough. The motion, because when it's in motion, then it comes to fruition. Without any motion, then it doesn't come to fruition. It's just a thought. Creates that transition process from being just a thought to gaining motion so that it comes to fruition. So then it comes to materialization of it. So the motion is the tipping point between the thoughts of it to it physically coming into reality, or the materialization of it. It's the difference between those two things though. Because if I was to add in an extra thing here, then that would be the consequence on the other end. So if I went here and then went So it'll be more like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's actually map that out so it's actually like a proper framework. Cool. What do we have here? Communication, exchange, communication, action. So thoughts. What's the design of thoughts?
To create experiences.
And what's the design of words?
The conceptualization of experience.
And agreements.
Trust.
And communication.
Completion. And then
actions.
Motion.
And then materialization.
And the beginning. Physical.
So we have like thought experience, conceptual experience, trust of it, which creates belief that it's actually going to come to fruition, completion of that by communicating that, which is going to create action through motion, which creates a physical experience of it.
Yeah.
So then that process consistently repeats over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's a consistent cycle.
Yeah.
Because when you understand the design of it and the process of creating through this process, well, then you're consistently already doing that on a moment to moment by basis. Now, if the materialization does not occur yet, well, then you're just consistently repeating that without that physical reality of it yet. This is why visualization works if you do it effectively, because you're doing it based on this process. And most people are just like, oh, visualize, I'm going to be a millionaire. No. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's going through this specific process of actually creating what you're actually looking at creating, by understanding every single step and the mechanism of what you're already doing unknowingly, bringing consciousness to it so that you can consciously create with it.
Yeah.
Nah, don't need to worry about that. So when we think about that, we think about our thoughts are something which are created, which are always just basically there. It's like creating a vibration of something, but when I'm speaking words, well, then they dissipate. The frequency goes out, but then it might hit the walls. It doesn't go to the ends of the universe. Thought will.
Yeah.
If I'm writing something down, then I'm physically doing something as well in terms of creating a manifestation process, right? If I take action around that creates another level of it. So when we think about creating something, we're doing all of them.
Yeah.
Because when people think about, right, I'm going to go and create something, it's like, all right, I just need to think about it. Oh, I just need to write it down. Oh, you're more likely to achieve it if you write it down. Yeah, okay, cool. when we understand all of the components, well, then we can create deeper levels of it, because yes, we use our thoughts throughout that process because we're using our thoughts through here. And it's like, well, if I communicate that with someone, well, that creates another level of communication of it. It creates an accountability of someone else to hold me to account to that.
Yeah.
So it's enrolling someone else. If I'm then writing that down, well, that creates a physical experience of me communicating something and then physically creating something that I wrote down. So I'm creating it physically again sooner. Because if it's just a thought, well, then there's no communication of it. There's no point of getting to that completion of it because there's no motion. It's a breakdown of it.
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. If there's no action towards that, well, it's a nice pipe dream, but then that's all what it is.
Yeah.
Then you can add the next level to it of using your intention through your higher consciousness to be able to create that on a deeper level as well. Because if your intention or your visualization or the entire process of what we've created is consistently creating something, well, then that eventually comes to fruition. And we already do this all the time. Because it's like, what you focus on is what you get. Where attention goes, energy flows, all of those sayings. Now, if we go back to when we're creating things out of fear, they tend to occur a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I don't want to crash my car. I don't want to crash my car. I don't want to crash my car. I don't want to crash my car.
Yeah.
I don't want to break my phone. I don't want to break my phone. I don't want to break my phone. Boom. So when we think about any manifestation that we're doing, there's always two kinds of goals. We've got towards and away from.
Push and pull.
Yeah. Now, when we're manifesting, we're only using towards goals, because if we're doing away from goals, we actually create the thing.
Yeah. I work with my clients, not to this deeper level, but just about helping them become more aware of what their motivators are, whether it's a push or a pull. It's okay to have a push, but that means that you'll always just be comfortable, and anytime you come down, you'll only ever just get there. Whereas a pull motivator is something that you're striving to achieve more so, looking for, aspirate, like to do better rather than just to not do worse.
Yeah. And when we think about it based on the energetic level of it, fear's down here. Now, fear can be an awesome driver. It keeps us alive. And some people are very much driven their entire life by away from goals. So what you can do with those people, because if they have a natural tendency to do it, you can just set away from goals that are consistently moving away from something, but it means that you're using fear as a driver. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a lot more prevalent in Australia as well. Have I talked about this? So in Australia, we communicate in a specific way, which is completely different to the rest of the world. If I say, how are you? What do you say?
Not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah.
How far is it? Not far.
Mm.
What are you doing tomorrow? Not much.
Yeah.
So in Australia, the collective communication model is an away from communication model, which is something you don't see it, like I haven't seen or heard of it anywhere else in the world.
There's no translation into many different languages about it either.
Yeah. Because it just doesn't happen. Like, the entire culture is driven by away from. And if you think about, well, I don't know, that could be because we're colonized by, what are we, convicts or whatever it is?
Yeah.
It's like all of these convicts, well, a lot of those people, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. There was another one. What was there? Another one? What'll come to me? But if you think about, oh yeah, in America, it's like the opposite. Why? Because if you think about all the people that founded that country, they were all moving towards something new.
Yeah.
So if you think about, all right, well, I'm willing to risk it all to be able to go across the world to somewhere I've never heard of to create a new life. Well, that's why they had such, it's perceived as one of the reasons why they had such a business culture through the 1900s. It's just like all of these people have risked everything. They're willing to risk everything. So they're like perfect for business. But then they all create an entire country of that. Well, that's just going to create an entire country of people who are driven to create that success.
Yeah.
And that's just based on a collective thought pattern. Bit of a random tangent there for you.
Fine.
Tangents are always fun.
Bit of history.
Bit of history, yeah.
Bit.
Okay, how do we get onto that? Towards and away from goals.
Yeah.
How do we get onto that even? Yep, setting goals. So we're like manifesting. So it's like, all right, we're looking at creating things. We can create based on away from goals. The limitation is we're doing it based on fear. Now, fear can be an extremely powerful driver.
Yeah.
And it keeps us down in the low levels here.
Yeah.
When we think about the opposite of fear is love.
Yeah.
Because if you have love of all things, then you don't have fear of loss of anything. There is no fear if you're in unconditional love. And unconditional love, based on this, is just what joy is. Joy? Joy. Yeah. So we can use it. It just becomes a limiting mechanism to be able to use it. So eventually, as we start to go through this process, we can go, all right, well, we can use fear at some points. And if we can use a higher frequency to be able to create, it's going to become much more powerful. Eventually, when you start to get into even the much higher states, well, then your need to be able to create things is just not even necessarily there because you just have things show up for you. That's where all of the synchronicities in your life just becomes a life of synchronicities rather than just like these random occurrences.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. So in this situation, so away from is fear driven, and then toward would be love driven. In that regard.
Yeah. Put in the slides then, eh? Add it in.
Cool.
So in terms of that, we can start to do that, and that becomes ultimately what we begin to create. Because if we're creating through our intentions, through our higher consciousness of creating through the frequency and the being of then love, well, then that means that we're consistently creating an attractive field of that as well. So when we think about all of these different levels, yes, we might be at that level, but we're also an attractive field of that level as well. So it's like if you're in fear, well, then you attract other people who are in fear. That's your predominant state. Well, then that's what you attract more of.
Yeah.
If you're in a higher state up here, well, then you attract more of that as well. If things are showing up for us, which are at a lower level, Well, that just creates the concept of that just showing up like that. And then it comes back to the key of everything is just a representation of what's going on internally for you.
Mm.
And if it's just a representation of what's going on internally for you, well, then that just indicates what's going on based on your attractor field.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
We were looking for. No. Cool. So when we start doing this, what we're really doing is starting to tap into more quantum thinking. Because when we think about linear, well, yeah, we are creating a process around it, but it's not as linear as anything else. Because most people, when they think about linear, it's just cause and effect.
Mm.
When we think about the quantum component of it, it's a cycle. It's not just it's not if this, then that.
Yeah.
It's understanding that the dynamics of that consistently change every single moment as well. Because if I just do this, I move my pen across, well, that's changed every single relationship of every single thing that's going on. When you think about it based on cause and effect, one thing's moved, but then that's also changed your focus of what you were looking at on the screen. It's also changed the air dynamics of everything that's going on here. So what happened in terms of one movement created infinite change and infinite possibility.
Yeah.
So if every single movement that we do creates that, well, then what is our power to be able to create if we're aware of it, if we're conscious of it?
Yeah, infinite.
Now, what's the things that keep us limited from that, hold us back from that?
Yeah, our thoughts,
Mm.
The agreements.
Yeah, so it's the trust of it.
Okay.
Because it's like, oh yeah, no, but I went through this process once and it didn't work. Well, that's some broken agreement somewhere.
Funny you say that. Like I mentioned earlier, how I've looked at this and gone, well, there you go. It was at the agreements point that I've gone, there's the hiccup. Or there's the break. Yeah.
And that's the thing, when we understand these steps, like we could break it down into even further steps in terms of every single thing that's going on. Doing that's just way too much detail. If we understand that we've got this to start, it's understanding, all right, well, where's the breakdown? Is there any action that I've taken from it? Well, okay, it's just a pipe dream then.
Mm.
And then it's like the most common one that people think about is the most common one that people think about is, all right, I'm gonna become a millionaire and I'm gonna buy lottery tickets.
My mum does that.
She's spiritual too, isn't she?
Yeah. She would like to be.
Now, could you go through this process to be able to win the lottery?
I suppose you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could. The whole point is the amount of time, energy, and efforts to be able to create that attractor field and consistently stick with it.
Yeah.
It could be years.
Yeah.
Because if you're one person trying to fight against on a weekly basis or however often you buy a lottery ticket against the collective thought processes around that, well, if it's not part of your journey, trying to create it as part of your journey, well, it's not necessarily going to be effective.
Yeah.
Now, when we think about people who buy lottery tickets, what we want to think about is this. Because the lottery is the foundation of the lottery is around a possible experience.
Mm.
Because when you buy a lottery ticket, what do? It's like, oh, you know what I'd spend my money on?
Yeah.
It's about the foundation of the thought process around the dreaming component of it. It's a what if.
Mm.
The limitation is it just doesn't go to the next level. It only goes here. It's like thoughts. You might even communicate that to someone, to words.
Yeah.
But the power behind that process, it's not very strong. Now, if you think about someone who is like in this top level up here, well, if they bought a lottery ticket, do you think that'd be extremely likely to win?
I feel they'd have a definite higher chance of winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah.
The point is, they would have no inclination to even buy a ticket.
No.
Because everything was already provided, like is pretty much provided for them anyway.
Yeah.
Interesting to think about.
Mm.
Yep. So I don't know how we got there either. What were we talking about?
Toward and away from goals.
It's a little bit of fun.
Day of tangents.
Yep. Always the tangents.
Always the tangents.
Towards and away from, hey? Where do we go from there? Here we go. Nope, quantum. Yeah, towards and away from. So what you'll find is if someone is predominantly an away from goal, it makes sense to start them with some away from goals.
Yeah.
As they start to build up the trust component, then you can start to move more towards goals. Oh dear.
It's been a long week, hasn't
it? It's just like everything's a paradox this week. Everything.
Yes.
Like towards.
Mm.
Yep.
You got some stuff happening around that.
Always stuff happening.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we then create that? Let's see if I deleted this properly. How do we create that? And do we need to know?
There's no 100% need to know.
Mm.
There's then that trust that comes in there.
Mm. Where does trust come from?
The agreements that we've made within that.
Yeah, so trust in this process comes from, all right, well, let's just start to build up our muscles on this, right?
Mm.
It's like, all right, I'm going to create something small first through this process.
Mm.
You know, start with the 5 kilo dumbbells, and then the 6, and then the 7, and the 8, and the 9, and the 10. Because if you just go through this process and go, all right, I'm going to make myself a millionaire, well, there's just going to be broken agreements throughout that entire process. So just like anything, the more that you do something, the easier it's going to become. And what you're actually doing is you're expanding your attractor field.
Yeah. I have things that just turn up for me. Usually stuff works out. I know in a business sense and an easy example is that I'll drop a couple of sessions. I'll think to myself, man, I really need to pick these up. And this happened the other week. As soon as Nicola dropped off, I went from 23 sessions to 40, like in 4 days. Because I realized, because I knew I needed to pick up somehow, and then I just had people looking in to see what the actual process is. It's going to be really interesting to sit down and just consciously be aware of what's going on through this process, and like you said, start small to see how that affects. This is something that I unconsciously do, but to actually sit down and do that would be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we think about that as well, that what we want to think about is as well as the size of the attractor field. Because one of the tendencies as well is, well, if we've got all these stresses that are creating limitations for us because we're out of alignment, well, then it gets smaller.
Yeah.
And then when you remove that stress, it gets back to its original size.
Yeah.
So what we're also looking at doing is expanding the size of that as well.
Yep.
Because the tendency is people live in what is their comfort zone, which is just their size of their attractor field.
Yeah.
And then when they start to go outside of that, then they create self-sabotage mechanisms, which keeps them within that. So it's consistently pushing the boundaries on those things, consistently creating even more alignment in all those different areas. So it consistently expands and grows and grows and grows.
And this is part of that.
Yeah. This is just bringing awareness to the functionality of how you're already doing it.
Cool.
I don't know why I put that slide in there then. What do we got here? Yep, okay. So when we think about going back to this original concept, I use the word allowing all the time because then there's no force component of it, because when we're down here, we're in force again.
Yeah.
So we think about the process of coming over here. Normally we just talk about what's going to be in there. What would we normally have in there?
Acceptance.
What does the process of acceptance take to get to? Because acceptance is technically the consequence.
Let go.
Sorry?
Letting go.
Letting go.
That's a consequence though. Forgive.
So when we think about this, acceptance, letting go, or surrender is part of that process. That design of it is forgiveness.
There you go.
Up here, forgiveness.
Yeah.
So when we think about that, well, then we can actually begin to really live every aspect of our life, because we can consistently let go of anything that we don't which creates limitation for us. It's probably a better way to say it.
Mm.
We can let go of those things. We can surrender to anything that comes up into our life and then just go with the flow of it, instead of going against the current and the stress, the upset of it all down here. So when we think about that, all that we're really doing in terms of every single component is just building out all of the different things. We start with, all right, well, we're going to choose it. Yeah, we're going to be responsible. Then we're going to allow. Then we go through the process of creating forgiveness, letting go, living in surrender, which automatically means that we end up in acceptance.
Mm. Mm.
When we do that, then we actually get back to a 0 point. Then we're not filtering through all the bullshit, so that when we're actually creating this, because if we're going back through all of the limitations that we talk about here, if we're going through this, our ability to be able to manifest and create isn't there, because it's not actually creating thoughts.
Yeah.
It's creating 3 levels of filtrated thoughts. So then our ability to be able to create isn't really there.
Yeah.
So when we go through this process, what we do is we basically have our shower, we get clean, and then we can instantly then create from that.
Yeah.
Make sense?
A lot of sense. Yep. 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 I was asking myself about this process yesterday. I'm like, how the fuck do I do this? And we went through it today.
Oh dear. Why? What were you asking yourself?
Oh.
Like, well, you're putting the attractive field out to the universe, so you receive it. So, yep, it's working.
Yeah.
And what were you asking yourself at 2:22?
Fuck off with the twos. I swear to God, all day yesterday. Excuse the language. I'm sorry. Just family stuff again. Was still trying to figure out how to move forward and choose my responsibility and accept what is right now.
In terms of
wanting more with family, regarding family, kids and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah. Another day. Excuse me. Oh, hey.
What's the story behind that?
Don't know.
When do you want to talk about that in the future then?
Not today.
Oh, really? I didn't pick up on that at all.
Really? No.
Weeks? Months?
No. Soon is fine. Fine.
Same where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you just want to, understand the difference between resignation as well. Because as soon as you communicated that based on having to something, it's like an element of resignation there.
Yeah.
And then it instantly creates all the fear around that as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We'll
talk about that in the future.
Yeah. Happy to.
Cool.
Happy to.
Anything else from me?
All good.
How'd you find that one?
Really interesting. Yeah, really, really interesting. very informative. Like I mentioned, it's good to actually see what the specifics behind that process is in terms of manifestation, and yeah, see what's possible with that, which is cool.
Yep.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Will do. You also?
I will.
Okay.
Talk to you
See you
soon.
later.